Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. On behalf of the VTA and Minority Business Consortium and the Silicon Valley Transit Consultants, we welcome you to this month's BART Silicon Valley Phase 2 Mentor Protege Workshop. I'm Raul Labrin. I'm a Vice President with WSP, and I act as SVTC's Mentor Protege Plan Lead. Today, I'm joined by MBC representatives Reginald Swilley and Carol Bean. Today's presentation is the fifth workshop that we've had over the last 5 months and covers the topic of the business of construction, pitfalls and profits. Note that today's presentation is being recorded and a copy will be made available to the public following today's workshop. We won't take the time to do formal introductions, as I mentioned earlier, but please take a moment to enter your name and company in the chat information to share with others. Include your contact information and again, the name of your business. The presentation is expected to run 30 to 35 minutes. We typically allow time for Q&A. However, the presenters today are comfortable with addressing questions along the way and making it more interactive. So feel free to raise your hand or type a question in the chat or in the Q&A function, and we'll get that message to them so that they can address it as we go along. Now on with the workshop and an introduction with our two guest speakers. Today's presenters are Len Turner and Latanya Hawkins, founders of the Construction Resource Center. Len has over 40 years of experience in business admin and construction management. With his degree in business and as an Oakland native, Len saw the need to support small contractors in the business side of construction when he partnered with family to create a Bay Area construction firm that grew to over $15 million in annual revenue. He's dedicated to closing the access gap with local contracting opportunities and supporting underrepresented areas. Latanya, who happens to be his sister, has over 25 years of experience in human resources with a degree in admin administration, helped in vocational training and construction management. Latanya has always had a desire to educate in order to empower those within the trade and to assist in building skill sets that stabilize businesses and yields profit. As a co-founder of the Construction Resource Center, she and her team wanted to create a platform to provide accessible resources that address trade barriers, as well as evolving trends associated with acquiring contracts and careers within the industry. So please join me in welcoming Len and Latanya.
Thank you for having us here. Len, on behalf of Construction Resource Center, Len and myself, and also our team, we just feel that this is a definite honor to be able to present today. And so as Raul mentioned, we wanted to really kind of give a personal and a professional approach as far as our experience as a small business and small contractor and the mistakes and also the experience that we've had over the years. And so while we have a formal PowerPoint presentation, we really just want to kind of create an informal setting where we're engaging all of you and we're addressing some of the pitfalls that we've experienced, but more important, some of the solutions that we've implemented as a team. And so Len and I, we do a tag team. And so we're going to be sharing our experiences. So you'll see over the couple of slides that we'll share that he'll interject and I'll interject. And we're hoping that you will interject as well with any of the questions that you might have. So while you see here, we want to tell you a little bit about ourselves. We have, as Raul mentioned, over 50 plus years of experience as a licensed general contractor. We're native to the Bay Area. We were born and raised in Oakland. And Len has experience with IBM and Disney in his background as far as business administration. And my experience as on our team was with Sutter Health and also with Kaiser. And so part of our background includes really kind of partnering with our family who had a background in construction. And we thought that as a family, we can get together, combine all of our skills, and it would be easy for us to grow a contracting company from the ground up. And soon we found out that even though we had our degrees, even though we've had experience with business administration and project management, and also with training, it really was something new for us to come together for a construction company and build that from the business side. And so we were able to build our company to where we experienced $350 million in contract acquisitions. That was a combination of residential and also commercial experience. Had partnerships with Kaiser, with McCarthy, Swinnerton, and we became signatory contractors But what we found is that we quickly saw that really there was a consistent theme within the industry. We saw that there were pitfalls that we were all experiencing as small contractors, and we were able to get information and assistance here and there, but how would we create a platform, or how would we identify a resource that would, be able to help us on an ongoing basis? So what Lynn and I would like to do, and again, this is totally interactive. We want to be able to get your feedback and some of the problems or challenges that you might be experiencing, so we can give our feedback as far as how we address those same challenges. And so,
excuse me. And so even though this is formal and it looks formal, we kind of want it to be informal. So when you look at this slide on funding, Latanya, did you want me to talk just a little?
Please.
Well, when we started, we thought our brothers and our cousins, they had the business of their companies set up. So we come from Fortune 500 companies and all that. And so we understand the business structure. And so when we joined our family business, there was really no structure. They had no lines of credit. They weren't an LLC or a corporation. They had no vendor relationships. So we had to develop those things before we even started. It took us about 1.5 years to put those things in place. And if you don't have lines of credit, if you don't have your bank statements, if you don't have all these things, then technically you don't have a business. So what we're going to talk about, some of the best and worst practices that we've done and how we overcame them. So when you look up about funding, good banking relationship, most of you, if not all of you, have a relationship with your bank. So try to get a line of credit. You're going to need it. You don't have to necessarily use it, but if you do, it's there. Family and friends, you want to see who believes in your business. You want to see how you can get money in a sense for free. Because once you start to grow in your business, you're going to see that you're actually giving an interest-free loan to whoever it is you're working for. So we'll talk more about that when we get into contracts. But investors, if you have an investor, you want to see, what they're doing, and partners, what does that look like? Credit cards. When we started, we maxed out our credit cards. You want to have access to capital. You're going to need capital. You're starting a business, you're going to need capital, and preferably unsecured. You don't want to secure your property or any other items that you have to secure funding. So if it's unsecured, it's better.
Perfect.
Okay, go ahead, Latanya.
No, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interject. But what we wanted to bring out is that this was a consistent theme with all of the small businesses that we were interacting with. And so these are some of the areas in which you can give attention to be able to help with startup funding. What I appreciate what Len brought out is that we were all property owners. And the first thing that a banking representative will ask is whether or not you want to put up your property as collateral. We stayed away from that. We wanted to be able to keep those assets clear. And so you want to take a look at what your resources are outside. And as Len mentioned, that unsecured funding is actually the best way to go. Well, I don't have access to the chat function. I do want to be able to see, I know someone's monitoring the chat function. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask.
Yes, and it looks like it says, oh, well. And what we did do, though, was put our equipment up. So you can put your equipment up to secure a loan. And so we didn't really have a problem doing that. And you may not have a problem doing that as well. And as you grow, it may come a time where if you're trying to bond and get a $10, $12 million project, you may have to put some of your assets up, but you got to be really, really careful. And we'll talk to that later as well. Latanya, you go to the next slide.
Absolutely. And before we move to the next slide, you also want to pay attention as far as the credibility of your partners. And so we had one of the pitfalls that we had in our business is that we had a number of different partners, but their credit rating was totally different. And so it impacted our bottom line. So it impacted as far as our funding opportunities. And so as an organization, you have to identify those individuals that would be able to have the ability to be able to get credit, to be able to not have anything levied. We had a partner at one time that was experiencing a divorce. We also had a partner that was experiencing an IRS levy. They also had back student loans. And so anytime we would actually go to apply for any type of credit line, that would continue to be an issue. So you have to know as far as the credibility, that viability of your team, as far as that credit side, and to be able to move forward with any financing and address those types of obstacles. And so that next pitfall that we really experienced as a group was really defining what that partnership was. And so, Len, if you want to talk to as far as how
yes, I do. So this is key. Our family, it's a family business. And so most people think, oh, it's a family business. We don't need a partnership. We don't need a buy-sell agreement. We don't need any of these things. You need those even more so. If you're not on the same page, your company is going to fail. It really is just that simple. So with a general partnership, you outline, and you have to do this. I have to understand what my lane is. You have to understand what your lane is. I have to understand if I said I'm going to put $150,000 up or $500 up, whatever it is, it needs to be specified in this partnership agreement. If you're only going to put in sweat equity, it needs to be specified. Here's how it's going to go. You have your family or you have your partners, you or the partner is doing all the work, but you're getting the same amount of money. That's only going to last for so long. But if it's not defined, how do you check that person? So you have to make sure that the roles and responsibilities are laid out. So you do that in your partnership agreement. It's very, very important. Without a partnership agreement, you're setting yourself up for failure. Failure in the sense that your relationship is going to be strained, or you're not going to have a relationship with that person much longer once the stuff starts to hit the fan.
Absolutely. And with the defined roles, there's no no gray area. And so what this allowed us to do is to be able to define those roles, and in instances where we did have disagreements, because they will come up, it's already defined.
Len and Latanya, we have our first question.
All right.
The question is, do you have a template for general partnership agreement you can share with us?
Absolutely. So in addition to actually sharing the PowerPoint, we will send out the template for the partnership agreement as well.
Yes.
Next important area is.
And so let me say one other thing, because
Absolutely.
that partnership agreement can also work as a buy-sell agreement. So you have to define what the shares are, what the percentages of ownership, because if someone gets a divorce, if someone passes away, then what do? If it's not defined, you're going to have some issues. So think of that as well. Continue, Latanya.
Absolutely.
There was one other question about, is this what you're talking about applying only to construction businesses, or would this apply to professional service businesses as well?
It applies to all businesses. Yes, you need this. You need the agreement. So if Carol and I went into business together, what does she want to do in 5 years? What do I want to do in 5 years? I want to continue the business. She wants to sell her portion, but if you don't write it out, how would you know that? And so you're just plugging along thinking that she's on the same page as you when she's not, and you're not. You have to spell it out.
Correct. And in this partnership agreement template that we'll be sending, you are able to define the type of business that this is referring to. So whether it's professional services or any other, you're able to use this template. And of course, with any template that we send out, we do recommend, of course, that you have your attorney review that as well. So the next agreement and the next pitfall that we had is as far as our organization, it was defining or identifying a template for a joint venture agreement. And so similar to what Lynn brought out, that if Latanya is going to joint venture with Len Turner, we both have construction companies, but in order for us to get a larger scope contract packet, we're going to partner together. And so we have a joint venture agreement, and similar to the partnership agreement, we need to be able to find those roles. We define our expectations, we define the percentages that Lynn mentioned before, and more. And so you never want to underestimate your worth. And so Lynn says that he's worth 60%. Latanya said, hey, what I'm bringing to the table, I'm worth 60% as well. We need to define what we're bringing to the table. But to small organizations, we typically underestimate our value. And so we want to take a look at our joint venture agreement and the language that we're putting in there, and we're placing a worth to what we bring. Lynn?
And so, yeah, and you also, in this joint venture agreement, when you grow your company and now these large companies want to partner with you, typically it's through a teaming agreement, a joint venture, some kind of partnership, but it spells out who does what and who gets what or receives whatever it is you're going to receive. So when you start to do a project and you have a joint venture, there's some mobilization money that's put together for your trailers, for your office space, for your office furniture, for your cars, for this and for that. Who gets all that when the joint venture ends? You have to understand what you're signing up for. Typically, the larger company says they're going to bond the project, and this is why you have to allow them to get more of a percentage. Well, there's 3 words in a contract, joint venture contract: joint and several. If you see joint and several, that means you're just as responsible for the bond as that larger company. And if the bank comes after them, they're going to come after you, or they can come after you. So you take that out of there, you take it out, and you put either, well, you want to put a dollar amount, because if you put a percentage in there, what percentage is that? Is that 30% of what you did in the beginning? Is that 30% in the middle, or is that 30% at the end? So you put a dollar amount in there, and that's what you're responsible for.
Mm-hmm. And you want to
let me interject real quick. There is another question from Stanley Cooper of Cooper Construction. How do you determine your salary for yourself and your senior staff and incoming staff based on the industry and your annual profits? Question mark.
So for us, how we determine our staff is based on the market rate and also the skills of our staff. So depending on the job description, what role they will play, that will determine as far as based what in combination with the market rate. Of course, we always take it into consideration that when we do our estimates, we also have our labor cost, but that labor cost is based on that rate of pay that is derived from, again, the competency level, that role, and what the market is.
And so you can do a couple of things if you want it. If you're working with the large generals or some medium-sized generals, they have their compensation packages already developed. You can ask them, what do they pay their project managers? What do they pay their project engineers? And so you can gauge what you would get from them. What does the president make? What does his or her bonus look like? You actually gauge it from the industry.
So that was a follow-up. Where do you find management rates? So I think you addressed it, but is there any other sources for management rates?
Absolutely. And so what we'll do is we'll send some of the links that we use too for those market rates. Mm-hmm. And we keep internal labor rates, whether it's in our leadership team or those within our field. We are always updating those on an annual basis. And
so the questions are flowing in now, so be careful.
Yeah. Okay, good.
What's the difference between JVing a project via subcontract and actually doing an actual JV partnership?
So it's a couple of things there. If you're joint venturing, then you and that partner, whatever your percentage is, if it's 50-50, 70-30, or whatever the percentage is, that is what you get on the overall project. Now, if one of you're going to sub back to the JV, then you're a sub to your own company, but it's a whole different agreement, because now you become a subcontractor to the JV, and the JV could be you guys could have set it up where it's a different entity. So your company, since you specialize, and I saw it was Basim who put that in, if you specialize in mechanical installation, then you're going to subcontract that back to the JV. And then between you and the JV, you guys can work out what that compensation looks like.
And do you see an advantage of being a sub versus having a JV venture agreement?
Oh yeah, come on. It's no comparison. If you're JVing, that means you're the owner. You're one of the owners. If you're a sub, then you're working for the owner. You're a tier down. You're tier 1, 2, 3, or wherever you fit in. But JV, now you have a little bit of say.
So is it more complex legally, take more time to set up? So there's some downsides with doing the JV agreement because it takes time?
Well, just like we had a template for the partnership, we have a template for the JV agreement as well. So typically you get an attorney, you pay thousands of dollars and they figure out what you need. And so what we tried to do was put this together so at least you have a starting point. When we started out, we didn't know pretty much, we didn't know anything about a partnership agreement. We knew it existed, but not how important it should be. Joint venture agreement, what should go in it, how a larger company could take advantage of you if you didn't know. And so typically you learn all these things after the fact. So when you look in the JV agreement, who has the managerial power? How many managers do they have in this JV agreement? How many do you have? So even though you may have 50-50, but they could be heavy on the managerial side, which kind of skews your balancing there. And so even though it looks like 50 or it's 50-50 on paper, but really is 70-30. So you just got to understand what's in that JV agreement. And in my opinion, it's worth the time to put it together because it allows your company to grow.
So I know how many.
Carol,
Yeah.
you also mentioned time, but also the money that's associated with it. So
Yes.
Lynn mentioned a very important component. The joint venture agreement that you typically will get from your partner will typically be in their benefit. The joint venture agreement that you want to use needs to be for your benefit. So when you have a venture agreement, the template we'll send out, it actually outlines every component of that relationship that you want to check. Glenn mentioned earlier that under general conditions, if you're working with the GC, you have no idea that they're renting back to themselves copiers, that they're renting back to themselves vehicles, that they're renting back to themselves desks, that they're renting back to themselves coffee makers. And so after that project, there's a profit that's associated with that. So you would never know that as a subcontractor. So with a joint venture agreement from the outset, when you are actually compiling the estimate with the estimators in your team, you're going through each aspect of that job, each of the costs, but you're also going through all the payout as well.
So what I'm going to suggest, because I know how many slides you have left, and we want to make sure that we get to as many as possible. If you have a specific question about joint venture, we may be able to get to it at the end, or you can reach out to Len and Latanya directly. So I'm going to encourage us to continue to move on.
Absolutely. And so what our next slide is also staffing, recruitment and retention. Typically, Lynn and I always agree that the person that you can afford is typically the person that we don't need. How many of us have been in situations where we've hired our niece or we've hired our cousin because they needed a job and we needed a person to fill a position. And so building your project team is very, very important. And so you need to base that position. That position needs to identify the competencies or the skill set of the person that you actually hire. And so do you have job descriptions? Do you have ongoing training? Does the person that you hire, do they have the required certifications? And do you provide ongoing training? And so this is something that we emphasize from the outset, because the last thing you want is to actually get into a project and you don't have the staff internally on the administrative side that actually is able to do the job. And then you don't want to have unqualified staff in the field. Glenn?
It's key. Do not build your position around someone's skill set. They need to possess the skill set for that position, or they need to be taking classes towards that so that they're learning it. But if you have someone unqualified because you're thinking you're saving money, you're actually costing your company money, time and money, because you have this inexperienced person in your office and they are losing you money. I cannot emphasize that more, because and we've done it. Everything we're talking about, we've done it the wrong way. So we're not saying we did it the right. This is why we know. We had our niece, we had our nephew, we had our parents, everybody in there, because we're trying to cut costs. Some things, as we go along, you're going to see some things you just cannot not afford.
Mm-hmm.
You have to figure out how do you afford them, or, and I know this is a hard reality, or you're not ready to be in business.
Absolutely. And you also want to continue to build your team as far as their evolving technology. And we're going to get to technology. And so invest the time and the effort in your team to be able to build them and also to be able to cross-train. You definitely don't want to be in a situation where we were in, where we had one person in the office that knew everything. And so if they decided to leave tomorrow, where do you find the documentation? How do you log into the software? How do we do our certified payroll? That was the person that actually did the certified payroll. So you want to have a continuum of training in your office and also cross-training that will provide a continuum, really, continuity with your business. And so that brings us to contracts. We mentioned joint venture agreements, we mentioned partner agreements. And so how many of us do a thorough contract review with an attorney? And so we often say, it's the first thing we say we can't afford as an attorney, but really this is something that you cannot afford. And so when you look at the provisions in a contract, what are you looking at? Are you taking the time to do a markups and tell them that, no, I don't want to accept this liability? We've talked to many small contractors that said, hey, I didn't look at the contract. I was just happy to get this $500,000 contract and I just signed it. I looked at the payment terms and I looked at when we would be able to submit payment orders. You don't want to do that. You have to be able to compare your scope of work to make sure it matches your estimate. You have to be able to submit RFIs if there's any clarification that's needed on any omissions or anything that's ambiguous. You need to be able to.
So it looks like
thorough contract review.
Oh, okay. You had locked up a little, Latanya. So
I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah, and so what you guys want to remember, once you've done 3 or 4, let's say, contracts and you've reviewed them, for the most part, they're pretty much the same. And so what we've done is broken down the contract. What are the top 10 things that you need to know when you look at a contract? What are you thinking? What do you want to do? And so just a few of them, but you want to understand the bonding. What is the bonding requirement? Maybe there's none. Maybe there is some. Remember that joint and several is going to be in this particular contract. If it says joint and several, and the company said you're not bonding, you are bonding. When you sign up, whatever the bond is, $500,000 to $20 million, if your contract says joint and several, you are on the hook for $5 billion or whatever the number is. The reason that's important is because if you are working, and let's say you have a $10 million bonding capacity. Well, if you just signed up for $30 million in your joint venture, you have no bonding. So your bonding is used up. So you need to make sure in your contract that you have a dollar amount so that you can continue to work. Mm-hmm. The other piece is insurances. You need to make sure that you understand the obligations of your insurance and the liquidated damages. So you need the entire contract. Typically, it'll reference the contract. Well, how are you signing a contract if you don't, and you're saying that you're going to abide by it, but you don't have all the documentation? Those larger companies, they have, let's say, $5,000 a day liquidated damages. You need to change that to $50 a day or whatever it is you think is reasonable. If it's a contract, remember this, everything is negotiable. Everything. You can negotiate that. And if you can't, then it doesn't make sense for you to sign up for a contract that's going to break you if it should go wrong. One of the things that you do in this business, and I'm gonna say most businesses, everything that we're going to talk about, let's say moving forward, is to protect you from a lawsuit. When you start a project, you start it out like you're going to get into a lawsuit, because it's not if you get into one, it's when. You're going to have a lawsuit. So you prepare it. The judge doesn't know me. The judge doesn't know her or him. They just know who has the best paperwork. So you start getting your paperwork together. And if your office staff is not up to par, then you're going to lose, because you're going to scramble around trying to get this paperwork together, and it's going to look like garbage. And so you're going to present it to the judge, and the judge is going to hand you back garbage. Garbage in, garbage out. That's what you're going to receive. Scope of work. This is so key. And we did this several times before we actually caught on to it. You have to make sure that when you bid your project, your estimate is the heart of your company. If your estimate is off, your whole company is off. So when we get to estimate, we're going to talk more about it, but the estimate has your scope of work. In your contract, you need to make sure your exhibit A or whatever exhibit it is matches your bid. Typically, these companies add in additional things. You think that, oh, they just put my bid in there. They did, and they added a few things while they were at it. So you got to make sure your scope matches. Latanya, okay.
No, absolutely. And you also want to take a look at your labor rates. Your labor rates or rates that you've actually entered into your estimate or that are included in your estimate do not necessarily have to be associated or the same as your change order rates. You want to take a look at that. Lynn mentioned liquidated damages, but there is such thing as reverse liquidated damages as well. You also want to look at timelines. Sometimes those liquidated damages, of course, are associated with the timeline of when you need to complete your project. So if it has 150 calendar days, but yet you're going into winter, and you know that there are going to be unforeseen delays because of weather, you need to account for that. So it's those types of things that you want to be able to identify and actually modify before you sign that contract.
And so if you guys don't mind, we're going to start speeding it up a little, because we are running out of time, but we have so much to talk on this subject. We just love this stuff. So we're sorry about that. And on this estimating piece here, estimating is the heart of your company. You need the owners need to understand estimating. Don't go out and hire an estimator and expect them to understand your business model. You need to estimate your own project, understand those numbers clearly, and go with that. Yes, you can have an estimator, but you have to be involved.
Perfect. And one of our pitfalls is we typically, when we started, we had a different estimator for each project, which was a no-no. So with our industry, we have to have an estimator that knows our culture, knows our abilities, knows our strengths, and knows our weaknesses. And also, because they know your company, they also can foresee some of the challenges that you will face when they're walking the sites with you and they're going through the bid solicitations and all of the specs. And you also want to be able to compare that estimate to your budgets. And so do you have an internal accounting system? We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about job costing based on that estimate. And so how that should be reviewed on a routine basis. And is there a process in place to be able to handle cost overruns?
So just real quick before we move on, we are going to press up against time. There's a lot of great comments. Really appreciate that. There appears to be a lot of interest in this topic. So for those of you who aren't familiar, the Construction Resource Center offers a formal training, and they're going to mention that towards the end. So all of this can be discussed in more detail over a 10-week period. So that's kind of the getting to the crux of it all. But please continue on, Len and Latanya, and for the rest of you, comments are much appreciated.
Absolutely. Everybody in this industry is really familiar with the RFI. And so Lynn and I can go on and on about an RFI, but we need to have the request for information. And this starts at the outset of the project. And so typically when we have a bid solicitation, we start with questions from the outset on anything that is unclear. And so if it's not in writing, it doesn't exist. And so if you have any questions, we put everything down on an RFI. And so you have to be able to get clarification on those omissions, on those ambiguous areas in the drawings or the specs. It reduces your liability, and it also prevents delays. And so we have a story that we always tell, that we actually wrote an RFI on a piece of drywall because we didn't have any paper available. It was a really short notice. We needed an answer right away. And that actually helped us in the end because we showed that the authorized signature had signed the RFI and gave the go ahead for more work. So you need to have an RFI, and Lynn's going to talk to the fact that you want to get a corrected drawing that's attached to that, because that actually turns into more profit.
So an RFI, like Latanya said, it's request for information. But everything about what we're talking about, how do you use it to your benefit? How do you use it to protect your company? How do you use it to build a profit? And so what I'm about to say can work either way, but typically it works this way. RFI, the reason you ask is because you can't see it or it doesn't show up on the drawings. So it's not clear. So you need them to provide you a drawing that clears up this unclear area that you're about to build. Typically, a small company would just go ahead and correct it and do the work and all that, because that's what we did. But you don't do that because it's not your design, even if it's better. If you do that, they can have you tear it out. If they don't have you tear it out, now you're on the hook because that's your design. Now you have the liability and you don't get paid for it. One of the reasons you ask for a drawing is because if it's not clear, then how could you have possibly bid it correctly? So when they give you a drawing, now you can bid that because you didn't understand it, neither did they clarify it. So it's a change order. And so that's how you get it to work in your benefit. Now they could come back and say, it was very clear. And in that case, it is what it is. And you have to do what was clearly stated on the drawings. So it works either way.
Mm-hmm. Great segue, because our next item is a change order. And so as far as our change in scope, if you have added change in scope, you always want to use a change order. We associate these with our field authorizations, because when our staff is in the field and there's an unforeseen occurrence that leads to added scope, we have them fill out a field authorization, and they can bring that signed field authorization back to the office to actually compile a formal change order. And so with your organization, you need to have a formal change order form that incorporates your rates, your profit, your markup, all of that according to your contract. And so all of this goes hand in hand with that contract review to make sure that your labor rates, your change order rates are there, and also what are you available, or what are you have access to as far as that markup, how it's defined in that contract. You always want to define the number of days that are delayed, because that's associated with your liquidated damages. So if you have any type of lawsuit or liability that comes at the end of the project that's associated with you not finishing by a certain date, you have documentation that identifies that this particular change order added 5 days to that calendar. And so along with change orders, of course, we always want to attach our receipts, our invoices, our purchase orders, even photos, and even copies of drawings or references to drawings and specs.
Yeah, and so the last piece of this, it would be nice if you had your hourly rate in your contract. That way you're not trying to negotiate it at the end. Typically, it's not in the contract, and in my opinion, it's on purpose, because you're going to get paid 50 cents on the dollar if you wait to the end. If you put it in your contract and it's signed, then you have an agreed hourly wage that everyone's agreed to. And when they sign for your changes, and it puts an hourly count. It took 2 days, it took 4 days, took 2 hours, whatever it is, the dollar amount has already been agreed to. That's the best way to do it.
Yes, and this is something that you also want to discuss with your subcontractors, because depending on whether you're a tier 1 or a tier 2 subcontractor will determine how much profit you get based on that contract. And so this is why you want to review the contract, you want to review the labor rates, you want to review the change order rates, and also the process for the change order with your staff, but also with your subcontractors as well. And so daily reports. Lynn, would you like to start with daily?
Yeah, so daily reports. Most small companies think that this is just some more paperwork, and it is, but this is a protection. What is your crew doing daily? That way, if anything comes up, that something was missing or something was broke or busted, we did the Boys and Girls Club in San Francisco. One of our guys, they said, busted a gas pipe. We went back to our daily report and he wasn't there. So those reports can protect you, but it could have also went the other way. They looked at the report and he was there. So now what? You got to pay for that pipe. So it works either way, but it's because if you're like me, I can't remember what I did yesterday. I'm going to remember something in 2 weeks or 2 years. Daily reports are key to your success.
Absolutely.
All right, I think we got to keep it moving, Tanya.
Absolutely. One more point on the daily report that you want to fill out one, even if there is no work done on that day. So even if you have no work done on a certain day, you want to fill out a daily report that says no activity. You also want to have it filled out in its entirety, because you also want to put down the weather, if you had any inspections, if you had any deliveries, if any deliveries failed to arrive. And so you want to have that as clear as possible. The 20-day preliminary notice, you always want to fill this out at the outset of a project. This is a standard procedure. This gives you the opportunity to place a stop notice or a mechanic's lien on a project. You need to fill this paperwork out in its entirety, but you also need to make sure it's distributed to the right individuals that are noted on the form itself. In the event that you do have to place a mechanic's lien, you need to know that there are certain deadlines and timelines. A mechanic's lien is only good for 90 days, and then you would have to actually place another mechanic's lien or move forward with other legal action. And so for the preliminary notice, we use our attorney. We fill these out, we have him review it, and then we send those off. But you also have that retained in your files to make sure that that's done on each project. Glenn?
Lien release. Every project, yes, I mean, there's always exceptions, but lien, you want to lien every project you work on. This allows you to get paid. When a company sees that you filed a lien against their project, you actually are letting them know that you know what you're doing. So don't feel any hesitation in filing a lien against your project. Oh, go ahead, Latanya, you want to?
No, and the form itself, preliminary notice, gives you the opportunity to place the lien. And so when you complete the preliminary notice, that GC and those vendors already know that this is a standard operating procedure. So just know that when you do the 20-day preliminary notice, it's not the lien, but it's giving you the ability to place the mechanic's lien, and that is a standard process.
Yeah, and so if you have any problems getting paid, then you can move forward with that lien. You want to make sure, and you place a lien against public works. Yes. Yes, you can.
And typically, depending on what the entity is, will determine whether or not you can do a mechanic's lien or you do a stop notice.
Right.
So that's why you would actually work with your attorney, because if it's a private versus a public municipality, that will determine what steps that you take. And so when we talk about insurance, you need to know, of course, each contract and each company, we all have insurance. We have the basic general liability, but do we need umbrella insurance? Do we need excess policy? Do we need professional insurance? Do we need employment practice insurance? Len and I were in a situation where we had an employee that said a derogatory, prejudicial comment toward another person. And so we found ourselves in a lawsuit that we thought our general liability insurance covered. Well, we needed employment practice insurance. And because we had a claim against us, of course, we not only had to get it at a higher premium rate, but our subsequent renewals were at a higher rate as well. So you need to be mindful that you want to sit down with an insurance broker, tell them what type of a company you have, but also the types of projects you have, and also the clients that you have and staff that you have to determine what type of coverage you need. Len mentioned earlier about coverage limits, policy limitations, and also you want to be mindful of your EMR. And so when we talk about insurance as far as workers' comp, that EMR or that experience modification rate will determine what your premiums are. So you're working to maintain a wonderful safety culture with no claims, no accidents, because that will equate to more money as far as your premiums are concerned.
So just know, as we go through these next slides, we have a lot more to say on them, but we are pretty much out of time. So project management, when Latanya hits this next slide on project management, you start project managing depending on the size of the work, not the day of. You do it 2 or 3 weeks before. You get your crew up to speed on what they're about to do, because if it's not, and you go out there, they don't know their scope of work. So someone is going to direct them, and they're going to direct them because I don't care what your scope of work is. I'm trying to get the project done. So now you're over here doing someone else's work, but your work is not getting done. So who pays for that? You do. So you have to make sure that your superintendent, your foreman understands the scope. All right, Latanya, let's go to some.
Document retention and also compliant checks are very important. Submittals, Len, go ahead, you can start.
Oh yeah, so submittals, this is key as well. This helps you and the owner. And so you know how, and this is a simple example, you go out and you buy a toilet, and it's a low boy toilet. They wanted a high boy, but your submittal says they want it low and they signed off on it. They bought that toilet. But if it says they wanted high boy, you bought that toilet. So you need to make sure whatever you're purchasing, you have a submittal for it, and you put a list together and you get everybody to sign off on it. And if they don't have what you're trying to get, then you can try and see if you can change it out, but you need to make sure it's approved.
Mm-hmm. And this is where it goes back to your contract and your specifications. Your specifications will outline or define how the submittal process works, but also will define as far as the materials that are needed. And so based on that contract, you have to make sure that you're compliant. And so you want to make sure that you have an internal submittal process. Who's actually compiling the submittals, who's getting the documentation as far as the product data, if that's what's needed, who's tracking the submittal submissions as far as the date submitted to the GC or the owner, and also if in fact that you have approved substitutions. And so we are, again, we have the field, but then you also have the office. Myself on the office side, I'm huge on this, that if in fact we send out documentation, we need to be able to track when it was sent out, when it was approved, when it was denied, and when we had to get our final approval and when that purchase was actually made.
So the safety is crucial. This is probably the most important piece of your project. Every day you guys have to do safety checks. You have to make sure that your people understand what they're supposed to do, if they're supposed to wear a harness and all that. You have to do it. So safety is crucial. You can't say enough about that. Every day you have to go into safety.
Yes.
All right.
I'm sorry, for safety, injury and illness prevention program, you want to make sure that you implement this. Every site should have an injury and illness prevention program. And if you need information in regards to this, feel free to give me a call. CPA and bookkeeper, go ahead.
Yeah, so you need, if you want to talk to a bank, you have to put your stuff in bank language. Everybody, oh, I can't get a loan, I can't do this. Well, if your books aren't right, would you loan someone some money? If you saw how they kept their paperwork, your paperwork has to be in the form that a bank is willing to loan you money. And so you need a bookkeeper. And if you're starting to bond, you're going to need a CPA so that you can get reviewed statements and all that. But the first thing out the gate, you need a bookkeeper. Tanya, we need an attorney.
Attorney, legal
attorney.
Reasons why you need it. They know the law, saves you money, aware of appropriate filing documents and deadlines, and bottom line, it reduces your liability. And so you want to have a attorney on retainer to be able to review your contracts, to be able to review any claims, and to be able to review your documentation. And it's also a good reminder as far as your document retention and how long you have to actually manage that and maintain it.
Yes. And what is this? Oh, union versus non-union. You just want to make sure you understand the union, what they're expecting, because this could be a great relationship if you understand what's expected of you. You don't want an adversarial relationship with the union, but if you know you have to give them their benefits and you have to give them your bank statements and you know all these things up front, then you set your office up that way so that when they request it, you have a file set up for that project and you shoot it to them. It really is just that simple. But if you don't have your office set up properly, then you're scattering all over the place for things.
Mm-hmm. And so technology,
last slide. Technology, you got to keep up on it.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Is that the landing?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes. And so for technology, you just want to make sure that you have a team that embraces it. When you don't, it affects efficiency. And so here's our contact information. We have tons of information to share, and we just want to keep everyone from making the same mistakes that we did.
Outstanding. Just real quick, I want to thank both Len and Latanya. I'm going to turn the next slide over to our partner, MBC, and Reginald Swilley. I neglected to allow him to introduce himself at the beginning of the discussion. But so Reg, can you come on and introduce yourself and talk to us about what's coming up?
Yes, I'm glad to see everybody here. I'm glad, Len, you and Latanya did a great job. That's a lot of information about how to protect yourself, how to make some money, and how not to lose the money you make. These Mentor Protege Program that Raul is putting together, we are hoping that these processes will help build your company. VTA is committed to using this whole process right now over these next few years of building this tunnel to help build these companies that's represented here. And we want to know how you feel about this. And I saw one comment from Brian that says, they want you guys to do a whole nother presentation so you can get in deeper on some of the issues you guys brought up. But we think this is a good thing, and let us know how you like these programs and these workshops, and we can bring somebody back up again. And we're glad you're here, and we hope this is really something great for you. Carol is going to make some announcements about some of our upcoming events. Come on, Carol.
Yes, I just wanted to thank Len and Latanya and the history that made it possible for you to be able to share your wisdom with others. And I know this is not an advertisement for your 10-week program, but the 10-week program is starting in September. It is Tuesdays from 6 to 9. And it's every Tuesday for 10 weeks. And this kind of information is what they're going to be sharing in more depth. We wanted to let people, we have a partnership with them, and 20 of the mentor proteges who go through us, and maybe you're not formally a protege yet, we have provided scholarships, subsidies for 20 folks, but many of the businesses that are coming on with a complimentary ticket are also having others in their company go through this training. And so, as I said, it's not an advertisement, but I want to make sure that if you really want to go deeper in this, that you know that there's an opportunity. And I believe I put it in once before, and hopefully it's there again. The other thing that's make sure that if you're not registered with VTA, if you're not certified, go to the Business Center and do that. You can see the link right there. Our next protege workshop, Mentor Protege workshop, is on client communication. How do you talk to these your JV or the general contractor, the people who are hiring you? How do you communicate well with them? That is the next one. We've got a couple of others that we're getting ready to schedule. One is about laws that protect small businesses so that you know what to expect and you can get covered legally. So we're looking to provide one for that. And then also we've been asked about how do you grow from a small business to a larger business. And so we're hoping that the four JV CEOs will come and share their experience of going from small to large. So those will be coming up, but next September, it will be the client communication one. And then we have just started the Bay Area Diversity Business Forums, and next September 14th, we are having a very special one. It's about getting resources, financial resources for small, diverse businesses. We're going to have someone from the state of California speak about getting grants. We're going to have someone from the federal government. We're going to have someone that's just going to focus on how do you get ready for a loan? What do you have to do? What are the pieces that need to be in play? And there are some other opportunities. We have legal advisors, pro bono, that will be providing like how to start up a business. What do you have to think about legally? And the fourth thing was business coaching. We have some banks that provide business coaching free of charge for a few months. So those are all things to look forward to, and I hope you sign up for them. I think I put the links for registering and going to, the other thing that's coming up is a Meet the Primes. Hopefully we'll contact the Meet the Primes, the 5 shortlisted primes that are part of this, part of VTA BART program, that you will make the effort to email them, contact them, send your SOQ, call them. But we will have an in-person event on September 22nd. It's not listed there, but I think I put it in the chat. And you can register for that event. It will be at the San Jose Convention Center. Lots of things coming up. We're really excited about it. And we just want to make sure that all of the barriers that we face as small businesses are addressed, and that you will have a fair shake, equity, and the possibility to really take advantage of what VTA is doing through this BART Phase 2 project.
Carol, let me cut in because there's one piece that you left out. There is we will be having an event on the Warriors Plaza at their stadium on the 31st of August. We will be doing a presentation about the overall BART project. John White will be doing it there. It will be an outside event. You know, we kind of halfway between nervous and not nervous about having indoor events, but we want to have one outside on the plaza at lunchtime on the 31st. And everybody that want to get some more information about this BART VTA Phase 2 contract, we've had a couple meetings over in Oakland. 2 of them were at Lynn Turner's facility. We've had a couple here in San Jose, and we want to make sure we have one in San Francisco as well. So we love to see you at lunchtime over on the plaza at the Warrior Stadium at Chase Center. Raul, thank you for the work you're doing. We're going to give it back to you.
All right, let's close it up. Thanks again, Len and Latanya. Thanks to all of you for participating, all the great comments. Reminders that this has been recorded and will be available on the VTA and NBC's website. All the contact information is available, will be made available. Thanks again, and we look forward to seeing you in the future at the many events that are upcoming. Take care.
Okay, thank you. Take care.
Take care, all.